Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the originals, the latest episode of Colony, as well as the latest episode of Reverie. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of the originals, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Colony, and or skip to what I say about this week's episode of Reverie. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of the originals. A great yet sad episode. Basically, it turns out there is a lot more to this situation. I thought like something was more nefarious behind the scenes between Klaus and Elijah being locked in there. Turns out, no. Actually, it's the entire Michelson family is locked in there because it's kind of like a family therapy session that basically, obviously it being what it is, it's meant to be like a place where like they each have to find their own keys to unlock the door, basically. I mean, and it turns out each of their keys are hidden in different places. Like for Cole, it was hidden in a book. I forgot the specific book that Marcel was referencing. Is kind of like because Hope knows you don't want to be here, that you want to get back to Davina as quickly as possible. Elijah's ended up being in a coffin because of the whole like she looks at him as death because, you know, what he did to her mom. Like, it's kind of his fault that everything happened. So she saw his key was at the bottom of a coffin in a dungeon beneath a whole bunch of snakes. Klaus's was hidden in letters between him and Haley. Haley would send him letters, but he'd send them back. That was during the years that he wasn't talking to her. He was cutting off communication between him and her and, you know, Hope. So Rebecca's was hidden in where she hid the letters for her, between her and Marcel, to keep them hidden from Klaus. Like I said, it was just kind of a giant family therapy session because even like, it's like, oh yeah, like Cole and him and Elijah talk. It's like, oh yeah, what happened between us? It's like, oh yeah, like you and me, we don't really talk. Like obviously you're a lot closer to Rebecca and Klaus, but it's also because of the fact that, well, we never really had that much in common. Plus the fact is you and Freya, you know, killed my wife. It's like, right, there's that old Davina situation. Let's not forget about that. I mean, that's kind of why things unfolded the way they did in season 3. And it's like, did I ever apologize for it? And I was trying to remember. I was like, did he ever outright apologize? And Cole was kind of like, in his own way, sure. And he's like, in the long run, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, it sucks. Yeah, I'm still pissed about it, but Davina is back. He's like, not everyone's lucky enough to say that. You know, it's like, oh, that sucks, dude. I mean, it worked out for him, but it didn't work out for Elijah because it's like, you know, and for everyone else because Haley's gone. Then between Rebecca and Marcel, it's kind of sweet because for him, it's like, okay, I don't get it. Like, I love you. Like, I used to be able to pick and choose when I love you, but now it's like, no, I can't. I've always loved you and I always will. Like, why won't you be with me? Because in her mind, it's like, she does much like Klaus does. Klaus pushes people away because he thinks of himself as a monster. Well, she kind of does the same thing. For her, she's like, I'm just going to end up destroying me. He's like, you're doing a perfectly good job even when you're trying not to destroy me. Because it's not, I'm not just worried about you ending up like Haley or Cammy. It's like, no, when it's all said and done, you're like, I'm worried I'm going to do worse. And we understand why later on, because for Marcel, he embraces the whole vampire thing. He chose it. But for her, it's like, no, that was something that was put upon her by her mom and everything. It's a curse, like this family, like, because she even talked about it because she was jealous of Haley because Haley had the child, she got married, she even died. Those are things that Rebecca feels like she can have. Even if she got married, she could never have the other two, like growing old with someone. Because for her, it's like Marcel embraces the aspects of being a vampire. And she feels like if I'm with you, all I'm going to do is fester anger in me because like I'm just going to resent everything we are. Not because, you know, just because it's not what she wanted. If it was her choice to be what she is, she'd be happy about it. But for her, it's like, no, like I never wanted this life. It was forced upon me and now I have it, you know. So because her love life has never really turned out well no matter which way it's turned, you know. Her and Matt, I guess that's kind of the reason why that didn't work out. Her and Stefan, it's always been a complicated situation when it comes to her love life. Her and Marcel has always been this thing, but I think it's to that point where she finally realizes 100% of what she wants, you know, and she knows that being with Marcel would just hurt him in the long run. It'd be fine on the surface, but deep down she knows, like, my sadness and unhappiness about the situation shouldn't drag you down. So basically go out, be with someone, unless some things can change, unless like she can become human and Marcel can. But then again, for her, it's like she probably wouldn't want Marcel to sacrifice that for her. But maybe in the long run, if it means being with her, maybe he's willing to sacrifice all of that. kind of a thought process. We learn more about why Klaus is even more pissed at Elijah. Because for Elijah, it's like, you've always been there for me. For the past 1,000 years, you've made me need you. You've always set me on a correct course. You've always been there. Hell, you're even the reason why Hope got the name that she does, because it's like, I even love that line where it's like, Haley's trying to think of a name. She says Catherine. And then like, Klaus was like, goodness, no. God, no. I was like, first it took me a while. I was like, what do you think God knows? I was like, right. I was like, right. Catherine. It's like, yeah, that's a big no-no. That's a big no-no all across the board. I pretty much figure everyone in the Vampire Diary universe kind of universally hates that name now. It's like, oh man, this little girl's named Catherine. Really? Never mind. I'm sorry. I automatically hate that girl just because she's got the name Catherine. That name is forever stained. So it's just kind of interesting. But it's like, yeah, I liked what they did, kind of bouncing around different time periods. Like obviously when Haley was first coming to New Orleans, obviously 15 years ago, which is crazy. That I'm glad that they put that time frame there to be like, yeah, it's been 15 years since like season 1. It's like, that's crazy to think about, because out of any show, this is the one that's jumped around the most timeline wise. Because even the Vampire Diaries only had like, maybe there's been some time skips, but the most prominent one was like season 7 when 6 to 7 when they had the hard time skip. That was like the only like hard big time skip they've ever had in the show. They probably had other ones, but not such a big storyline, so, but this one's had multiple time skips. So I think that's just kind of fascinating all around. But, yeah, just kind of like where him and Haley started off at, where it's like, she's like, don't let me down. Like, I like to believe that you really are here for this baby, so please don't let us down. Sprucing up the place, even though the place wasn't that great to begin with, what eventually became their home. The symbol of the Michelson family, even later, it pisses Klaus off because he smashes it, because I guess for him it's kind of, because without Haley, that Michelson family will never be what it was, because Haley helped make it whole. She was their hope, is even what he was saying. Like Elijah was worried at the moment Haley died back when she was giving birth to Hope, that she was going to, like, now that she was gone, like the hope of the family was gone, and that's where Hope got her name from. I don't remember if they've ever brought that up storyline wise, how Hope came to be. That might have been something obviously retroactively going back, but still, nevertheless, even like the 4 years ago, it's kind of sad, because even Haley was like, I haven't given up on you, Klaus, because he had kind of given up, like at the time, Haley didn't know why things ended up the way they did. So, because it's interesting to find out that basically all of this was a combination of Hope and Freya. Because for Freya, she's helping out Hope because she made a promise to. It's like, because Hope said that she was going to find a way to fix her family. That way was to unite all of them. So she did all of this so she could basically pull the hollow out of them, so her family no longer had to be separated, even if it means losing herself. Because if things stay the way they did, she'd lose her dad forever. And also Freya's like, the fact is, you want to talk about being a dad and everything. Where were you? I was there with her and Haley. She didn't do she did what she was told. And the one time she didn't was because she missed her dad so much. And it's like, she's already lost her mom. She can't go the rest of her life not having her dad either. It's too painful, So that's why in Freya's mind, it's like, no matter what it is that happens, like she feels like this is what needs to be done. Because also it's Hope's decision, and it's like, I don't know, I'm so mixed on it, because at the same time it's like, you are her family, you're looking out for her, she is the future of the Michelson family, but also she's your niece, so you care so much about her, that she's in so much pain and you want to help her whatever way you can. It's like, the fact of the matter is, this family themselves, each member is going through such great pain, but they came out the other side of it. It's like, if Hope needs to do this to come out the other side of it stronger, she has to do it on her own. You can't just like, this isn't your little girl anymore. She stopped being your little girl the day Haley died. That's what set all of this in motion, took away her childhood, because there's no going back for her now, so. But the other side of me is like, but at the same time, Freya, you don't know what you're messing with, type of situation of like, you don't know what's going to come about because of this. And obviously, you have Klaus being, a little paved off about her. I mean, especially because she tried to pretend like she didn't know what was going on, even though she had a part to play in all of this. I wonder, well, I guess she could go at any time she wanted to, but she was there to kind of counsel them. But I guess after saying what she needed to say, she could just up and leave, so. But what ultimately comes out, for one, is like Elijah actually remembers everything. He's just not quite willing to go all the way there. For him, it's just kind of like, oh, this family, all of you act like, why shouldn't you all be glad that I'm going? I made you miserable. But it's like, yeah, but that's what family do. You get pissed at each other. You're miserable sometimes. You love each other. You hate each other. There's something I've said about this family. They have been through a lot. They love and hate each other. They've attempted to kill each other on occasion over the years. All the times Klaus has daggered each one of them. But in the end, they always come back together because one thing that is, always and forever, they will love each other, And Elijah started treating everything kind of like, some juvenile promise that he made, in a sense of like, even his love for Haley to him is just kind of like, it's just a byproduct of me trying to play that role. But it's like, it's not. Like, you genuinely loved Haley. And the fact of the matter is, even Klaus being like, that burning from the doorknob, that's because that's what Haley went through. It wasn't like a quick death. She burned on fire. It's like, she went through that, and you didn't do anything for it. So it's almost kind of justified that your brain, your consciousness is telling you like to go through that. So, but when it's all said and done, he remembers, and it breaks him, and he just breaks down because he remembers everything. And I think in the long run, it's easier just to be like, yeah, let him live that life without pain. But it's like, no, like he needs to go back to being who he is because they all need him. He needs to remember because it's like, because if there's even one person that's been touched by Haley that doesn't remember who she was and what she did, it feels like, I don't know, it's like almost like in my mind, maybe that's not the way it's meant to be seen, but it's almost like killing her all over again if he doesn't remember out of anyone, the one who loved her so much, who she played such a huge role in who he was and everything. But Antoinette gets cured. But she's like, I thought I lost you. And he walks away and he says, forgive me. Because as she feared getting his memories back, he doesn't feel the same way about her. Because the way he feels about her, he cared about her, but not to the way he cared about Haley. Losing her is just a blow that... Because the thing is, the Elijah then couldn't know what the Elijah knows, it's like, you think like, everyone's telling you felt this way about Haley, but it's like you didn't remember and you didn't feel that way. The heart always remembers on some level, but he had an inkling, but he didn't know. He thought like, there's no way me getting my memories back will ever change that. Like whatever time I spent with Haley won't compete with what he went through with Antoinette. But it's like, no, like what you have with Antoinette can't even come close, sadly. So I'm curious to see what she does in the long run. Like, will she kind of go Fatal Attraction or something like that? Which once again, I feel like I've talked about this before. I've referenced that movie. I know the gist of the movie. I don't think I've ever sat down and watched the entire movie. I've seen bits and pieces, I think. It's weird because that's one of those go-to things of like, what it means. It's kind of like like kind of crazy person getting a little obsessed and stalkerish. Like, that's kind of what I would assume was kind of like the big hit in that genre, but nevertheless, it's just one of those interesting things. So I don't know if anything will come about that. We haven't seen Roman because obviously Roman's kind of been kicked out, so he doesn't need to be coming back to New Orleans. But Antoinette still has her brother in the long run. What comes about that? I don't know. What happens going forward between Hope and him? Yes, he backed out at the last second, but all this happened because he kidnapped Haley. So Hope won't see things that way. No one else will. Klaus will probably be super pissed. Might even get Elijah being super pissed to the point he wants to kill him. So I don't know. We have Elijah dressing back up in suits again, which even I didn't even notice that too much. I feel like I should have, because obviously the last time we saw him wear a suit in the past 7 years was the fact is that when he got off the bus, he hasn't worn since. But now he's back in a suit, and it seemed like he was taking his time to finally mourn Haley himself. But there was even a note from Haley that Klaus had never read because she never sent it, because I guess in her mind it's like, well, if I send it, he's just going to resend it anyway, so send it back. So she just kept it, or maybe he came back before she needed to. It seemed like it was a picture of Hope when she was younger, so it seems like it was more so like she kind of just gave up. It is kind of interesting because the entirety of the episode we actually never get to see what happened on the outside. We hear about like the hurricane and stuff like that, but the entire episode took place inside that, mental projection of their house, which I thought was so fascinating. So things have kind of been stepped forward. The hollow situation, because it's interesting because they talk about like her being stepped into darkness, but they don't outright talk about like the hollow itself, like repossessing her. They don't really talk about that. They talk about her falling into darkness and stuff like that, but I feel like they don't even call it out by name of like, I wonder would she even pop up? Like, is everything that she represents there the darkness that will consume Hope? Maybe it's not even like, the hollow anymore. It's just this powerful darkness of hate and anger that would just consume her. Maybe it doesn't even look, maybe like what was the hollow in her is completely gone. Like what originally was the hollow is going, like who she originally was. Because I actually don't even remember her name now, but because I'll always refer to her as the hollow. So maybe all that's left is the hollow. So because it's just interesting because they don't treat it like the death and destruction if we come back together. But I don't even think this season they've ever been like, oh, the hollow will be. It's like, no, they haven't even called it by its name this season. I don't think, not unless I've missed it, but I'm pretty sure they haven't. So it's just kind of an interesting thing. It was a very interesting episode altogether. We are still stepping towards the death of the firstborn siblings. Like I said, Freya has the best of intentions of kind of letting Hope doing what she needs to do, but maybe in the long run it won't be a good thing, especially like when Vincent and the others find out like she let this happen. I mean, because even Freya's kind of like, yeah, she saved the day and no one knows what she did. No one knows what she did. She's a hero, so I don't know, man. I'm very interested to see where the next episode takes us, because I'm assuming Cole went back to Davina. I'm sure he's not doesn't have a real reason to stick around. Rebecca's leaving as soon as possible too. It's kind of sad. It's just kind of the grand scheme of things. It's just kind of like it takes what's kind of sparked all this in the first place. It takes some great disaster to kind of unite the family. Like I said, like Cole kind of gave that idea to Hope, which sparked kind of things playing out the way they did. But let's not forget, we still have all those people that follow Greta and August. Like, we still have them to kind of be concerned about going forward, especially with all of this and Hope. So it's definitely going in. Like, obviously, like I said, it's a very family therapeutic episode. And I'm very curious to see where we go when we kind of go back to looking at the quarter in New Orleans as a whole, like what's going to happen to the world now going forward. Now that the Michelson family is kind of reunited to a certain extent, they're no longer plagued by the hollow. So ultimately, I'm very interested to see where this all takes us. And now moving on to this week's episode of Colony, a great episode. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break things down. We don't know how much time has passed by between the last episode and this episode, but a good enough amount of time for them to be kind of situated in Seattle. It seems like they've been living here probably a couple months, maybe, I would assume. Definitely a while for everything to kind of seem like normal routine stuff. And so let's break some things down. For like Will, for example, seems like he's a taxi driver, or kind of well, maybe kind of similar to an Uber, whatever the case may be. What's interesting is he also has a side job being like kind of a private eye. I was like, oh, did they set you on that? It's like, oh no, he's doing that all on his own. So I'm assuming they don't really go into it, but like he's working on a missing persons case. Like this woman, her husband Terry has been missing. She hasn't seen him since they got to like Seattle. She saw him when they went into like the camp, and that was the last time she saw him. And we'll start bringing up some stuff about like, oh yeah, people disappearing, doctors, engineers, soldiers, and stuff like that. So I immediately treat that as a situation of like he was investigating Seattle on his own, and he started going to these different people, probably like passing his name around from different people to see, like, try to understand like what's really going on in Seattle. So, but he ended up getting this case. It's kind of sad in the long run what he ends up finding out, because it's like, oh, Terry, because it's like, oh, what is Terry? Oh, he's a mechanic. It's like, okay, so we know mechanics kind of get taken because they're kind of special priority in this whole situation too. Obviously, the Raps building machines and stuff like that. So, well, need people who can work on machines and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, so maybe he was taken as well. Turns out the dude he was meeting, because he went to a friend of theirs, Lillian. Terry used to work for her husband, Jonathan. Turns out Jonathan and Terry are the same person. He took his identity, and it's like, Will got super pissed about it. It's like, you asshole, your wife is struggling back there with your kids, and you just left her alone for what? Just for another woman? And he's like, oh, this was always the plan, but then the arrival came and it complicated things. But now it's like, hey, they're situated, I did my job. It's like, you did your job. It's also because Will himself is kind of like such a family person, because it's just like, yeah, the fact of the matter is, it's like, you don't just quit your family in this world, no matter what the situation is, also because having recently lost Charlie, like, I'm sure that's fresh in his mind. So him, it's like, you left your family behind, you piece of crap. So maybe on some level, it's something Katie kind of gets at. She's like, you need to stop blaming yourself. Maybe because he kind of took that frustration of losing Charlie. Is like, you failed your family. Like, he took it out on Jonathan/Terry and beat the crap out of him. But when it came to telling his wife, he didn't actually tell Terry's wife the truth. It's like, your husband died. It's like, what? Heart attack. Just because for him, it's like he'd rather her have this happy memory of him rather than like tell him the truth and basically destroy her entire world. It's like at least this way she keeps a good memory of him, that he was a good man, good father, that he didn't just abandon them. Then at the very least she can go to, taking whatever money she has and trying to build a better life for herself. Because it's like, oh, he's working a great job. He has a great house and everything like that, but you're leaving your family nothing while they're struggling, you piece of crap, And that's a shame. And Will didn't like that. So it's kind of interesting because I feel like Katie doesn't really know, because it seems like she's working a job where it's like, okay, she kind of helps people get situated. And it's like, oh, she brings people in, like kind of works the system to be like, oh, yeah, okay. So it's like she kind of hands out the forms and stuff like that and lets people get into Seattle. It seems like that's her job, which is so interesting. And that's so fascinating about this particular situation. It seems like their roles have kind of reversed in many regards. And I think that's what this episode nails so heavily because, it is kind of like a colony again, but it's like Will's the one that doesn't really trust the place, but Katie's the one that's like, no, we have to accept this place as it is. Because even her friend, Michelle, who she works with, I guess it's really her boss, is kind of like, hey, Will, you don't have to be such a downer, because even at the party, he's just kind of like, oh, yeah, so freaking great. It's like, oh, want to join community patrol? Nah, not really into law enforcement. But the uniform, he's kind of a dick at the party, and even Katie kind of calls him out for it. It's like, because even you see at one point in time, they walk past each other earlier in the episode, don't even say anything to each other. Like, it seems even Bram and Gracie are kind of walking on eggshells about the whole situation. He's worried about it, because even Gracie's like, are mom and dad going to get divorced? And Bram's like, why would you ask that? And she's like, I don't know. Because even she can feel the tension between them. It's just kind of like, it's a combination of just losing Charlie, coming to this place. He never wanted to come here in the first place, but Katie's like, no, everything's good. We got a family, our family's safe. They got schools, we got work, we got a good home. Like, it's a good place. It's not perfect, but it's good. But then Will's kind of like, that's not the Katie Bowman I know. I mean, to be fair, it's like Katie's still in there a little bit to the point where she is trying to help. There's the Winslow family. She knows that they're trying to leave because it's like, oh, we heard LA's getting repopulated. She's like, where the hell did you hear that? And it's like, oh, it's a rumor. It's like, yeah, rumors like that tend to seep out because, we know that the occupation wants you to know. They want more people to go back to LA so it can be another place that they can start working on defenses, what the hosts need against whatever enemy is coming their way, because they're running out of time, so they need to kind of ramp stuff back up. So that's what the whole LA situation is all about, which we also know. I wonder on some level I doubt he went back down because he's moving up. We haven't cut back to it yet. That was just last episode, but I'm very interested to find out like where is good of Snyder heading, when this whole situation's playing out, like what he's really up to, He set the stage for a lot of stuff last episode, but I'm curious to see what he's up to. But obviously, this episode was focusing more on Seattle, seeing things. But there is stuff obviously bubbling beneath the surface, and Will kind of sees it, but I guess he hasn't really talked to Katie because they're not really that much on talking terms just because of everything that's happened. But like the fact is, she did whatever she could to get that family in because her friend Michelle's kind of like, oh, you should do this. And it's like, oh, that's okay. Like, thanks for giving me this loophole that I can help this family get through with, so... But I think even Katie is starting to see like the pieces fall apart because she was like, okay, let's check on this family, but Michelle won't tell her exactly where they are. It's like, here's the address. See, they're perfectly fine. She just showed them a tablet with the address because she tried to look it up herself, but like a higher up wouldn't let her. Like the program was like, oh no, someone higher up has to look at it. But when she actually goes to the address, the place is empty. Then you kind of zoom out, the apartments beside her are empty. So basically the entire building where they're supposed to be relocating people, empty. So it's like, what the hell did I sign him up for? She said that like, oh, you're good you'll probably have to do some construction. The fact is that he's good at construction. Put him in that top tier to be tier 1 people who get probably like, if you're tier 2, well, I don't know. Because all the tier 1 people are supposed to get through, certain people have priority and stuff like that. I'm assuming people like doctors, soldiers, engineers, and stuff like that. Him being a construction dude, them constructing the weapons they're doing. They needed a labor force, so maybe that's what that's about too. So Katie, unbeknownst to her, thinking she's doing good, especially because the Winslow family lost her 5-year-old on the road, so she's sympathetic. She's not supposed to be getting too attached to the families and stuff like that. And I guess we see why, because like, you're not supposed to care enough to get these families like check up on them and stuff like that. So that wasn't in her job purview. So it's like, where are these people going? They're being shipped off somewhere probably similar to the factory somewhere in Seattle, I would assume, since the factory is no longer on the moon. I mean, the one that was there got destroyed. So, and like I said, you have the whole situation with Bram. He's got a new girlfriend. He's trying to he's trying to build a life too, because for him, it's like, he's trying to get a better job, because it's like he knows things are getting bad between him and his parents. Things are getting bad between them. So it's like he wants his own place so he can bring his sister in case things kind of turn bad. So, because even on some level, he's seeing it himself. So even he's kind of worried about things kind of being bad between them. So, like I said, it's interesting. And like I said, everything's kind of flipped a little. So it's definitely going to be interesting. Because there was even little details like Gracie being like, yeah, she's learning physics. And even Bram's like, that's weird. I didn't start learning that till I was in high school. Aren't you too young to be? And it's like, because they're trying to get people learning stuff more quickly so they can help. Because the more younger people learning hard stuff like that could be beneficial in the future for the host when they need more smart, able people to help build these defenses against what's coming. So it's all like future proofing the future, you know? It's just like, oh, we're having all these little things set in place so that the future, like whatever comes. So like, in case, you know, they still have to fend off their enemy in the future, they'll have a younger generation who's getting older who could be used to prepare. Like, so it seems like that's more so what's heading in that direction. So that's fascinating as well. But to me, the real kick in the teeth was who popped into Will's car at the end. The moment he was like, someone didn't get it, someone got in. I was like, wait, is it? Don't tell me it is. And it's your boy Broussard. It's like, yo! So obviously he made it to Seattle. He was like, man, you're a hard man to find. And you see Will is almost happy to see him. It's like, he's like, so, you know, what do you think of Seattle? And it cuts here. I'm like, oh, that's so good. I'm wondering what's Katie going to say once she finds out Broussard's back. Will Will even tell her? I'm gonna, you know, because like I said, Katie's not the revolutionary that she was before. Like I said, because for Will, it's like we're trying to pretend like Seattle isn't being treated just like a colony. We know what was happening beneath the surfaces. It may not have red hats like a typical colony, but we still have like those community patrol people. So it's the same equivalency, you know. It's like, oh, we're trying to make our neighborhood safer so that, you know. I mean, because as we saw at the beginning, like Seattle burned before, but it took Wayne Brady's character like calling in stuff like his fact that we still don't know exactly what went wrong there. I guess because he said like people were using his program wrong, so the right people weren't being put into the program the right way. So basically he wanted to shift Seattle. Seattle's more his baby to control now, which is interesting. Which I guess every system that's in play right now is of his design. I mean, the question is like, that seemed like that was probably a good time ago. So the question is like, is he still alive running things? I'd assume he is. I mean, the fact of the matter is he even met with the host. So that's probably why Seattle is even more so the way it is right now, because like, oh, he's using his algorithm more precisely. I mean, the fact of the matter is, once again, they know exactly who the hell Will is. They just haven't done anything. There's that whole list of people, like obviously the walkers won't kill certain people. I mean, maybe that's why Terry and his family were spared during the whole situation, was because of that exact situation. Because of Terry's mechanical aspects, and obviously he can't really talk too much about his job, so they probably don't care too much about his home situation, but maybe they would, just because that's why he's kind of like, he's like, oh, if I tell people at work at your job about your whole home situation, that might kind of stir up some problems for him in the future. But I guess like that could be kind of part of that as well, because that's going back to it once again. What's that list about? I think I might have said that before, but if I didn't, at the very least, like it seems like that's what his Wayne Brady's character's like whole thing like might have been about. Like he might have set like this is his protocol, like what's going down in Seattle. So why Seattle only? Why not make the protocol everywhere else? I mean, for him, I guess he wants there to be one safe place that kind of be run his way. But I guess even he can't run everything the way he wants it to. There probably had to be stuff that he kind of had to give way for, because the host wanted it that way. But I'm thinking like that might be what the whole list thing is about. Like obviously Broussard's on it, Will is on it. They know exactly where Will is, but they haven't busted him because he's right where they need him to be. That's the whole point of like the walkers. Remember what Will Will said, it feels like the Walkers last episode were kind of leading them in a certain direction, kind of fencing them in. It's like they wanted him to go to Seattle, like give him no other choice but to go to Seattle, because that's where he's supposed to be for whatever it is this war. Is that more, like I said, before I thought it was more on the host side, but what if it's like specifically on Wayne Brady's side, his character side? Maybe it's a culmination of it. I don't know. I'm very interested to find out. We still 100% don't know what that list is about, but it seems like it is going to become more prevalent as the season progresses, because it seems like you can't help but notice like a lot of that's kind of seeping from that very list, all that's kind of going down. So maybe that's even how Broussard was able to get in. I doubt, because it doesn't seem like you just sneak into Seattle. So I wonder, is his friend, played by Peyton List, once again, I've been calling her Lawrence this entire time, like, I wonder, did she make it through? There's still that whole dome thing that they came across before, because Broussard also knows that they're building the weapon to fight what's coming in Seattle. Well, he actually doesn't know about the other enemy, does he? No, like, the only people that knew were the people in that camp, like, who talked to the higher ups know that, but like Broussard doesn't know that until like him and Will probably exchange information next episode. It's definitely going to get very interesting with things going on. I'm very interested to see how they all play out in the next episode. It seems like Seattle is going to be the place to be. Also LA, but I'm curious to see what that looks like. What about all those people who were taken like last season, like Katie's sister Maddie and her son? Like, what about that whole situation? What did that turn into? We have not subsequently seen them since season 2's finale, so the whole rendition situation. So we will just have to continue and wait and see. And now moving on to this week's episode of Reverie, a great episode. This episode, it's interesting because immediately this episode is like, oh, we're going to take legal action against the company and everything, which is interesting. Even after all these incidents, this is the first time any legal action has necessarily come up, which I thought was kind of interesting. I mean, we might see a lot more of this coming forward, especially considering the fact that there are more and more incidents coming up. But this particular one deals with a dude named Nate. He's got a wife along the way. He lost his job. He's kind of in the process of losing his house. His wife's got a baby on the way. I think he has a wife along the way. And he's been stuck in Reverie. At first I was thinking like, oh, he's kind of got like a Robin Hood complex of like, oh, he wants to, like, I was thinking maybe he felt like he wanted to do more because he's robbing banks and then he's tossing money out. So it's like, oh, is he kind of got like a Robin Hood complex in the sense of he wants to do more with his life and he's trying to live adventures and stuff like that. It's like, no, in the long run, it ends up turning out that, in all honesty, it is the main reason why he's there is because he's afraid. Initially, his wife didn't think the break-in that they had at their house had anything to do with it, but it turns out in actuality it does. It has everything to do with it because for him, he felt scared because something he hasn't told anyone, even Annie. Like, for one, he didn't go to the police to identify the dude when they asked him to. He bailed like multiple times. And the fact is, the dude came back sometime after the break-in and threatened to kill him if he ever testified against him or whatever. So he's scared, and like that's what this is all about, because it's like Annie's better off without me is what he said. Like, this is where I live now in the Reverie. I did like all the stuff that Mara did to kind of get his attention. The armored truck, setting his car on fire, running away with all the jewels and stuff that he had. Because it's also something interesting when you think about it. Annie talked about the fact is like, oh, for her, it's like, yeah, he's always been in control. And that's what that world gave him, control, because he had fear. But this is a place he didn't have to be afraid. Like, he kind of dictates how everything goes. He can be fearless. And that's what terrified him the most, is because the fact is he thought, because it's like, oh, I'm a coward, I'm pathetic for not doing anything. I didn't fight, I didn't scream, I didn't run away, I just froze. And he thought, like, Annie won't look at me the same way. She won't love me. She finds out the truth about me, that I'm a coward. But it's like, dude, anyone would freeze under that circumstances, because the fact is, like, because the thing is, Annie didn't know what was, because it's like, oh, he acts like he's 100% okay. He's telling me to move past it. But it's like, that was all a front because he was dealing with that on the inside, the kind of turmoil and everything. So. But when the time came, he was able to kind of testify. Well, he was able to point out, yeah, it was this dude. So that in itself took a lot. But it's something Mara talked about. The fact is that will never go away. That fear will never go away unless you do something about it yourself. Because she kind of talks about her similar situation. The fact is, after what happened with her sister and her niece, she has not been back to that house. She couldn't bring herself to go back subsequently since everything happened. Once again, this is still fairly fresh. This was only like 2 years ago, so, which is understandable after everything that kind of went down. So I thought that was just kind of a nice, because obviously it's something, it's once again the nature of the show where it's like helping out other people is kind of helping her. So like, a lot of these people kind of have similar situations to her. In this particular case, is like what he was afraid of, having to face it, which kind of inspired Mara, which I thought was kind of a nice touch. It's so interesting when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. It's such weird little details, but it's like the fact is that he had his own little crew in the Reverie and everything like that. It's so weird because it's like Reverie becomes more in tune with you the more, like, because she's part of the system now, like it interacts with her. Like I said, that was something that didn't happen in the first episode, but it's like the dude that's like the SWAT team dude or whatever, it's like, dude, lady, what the hell are you doing? It's just like, it seems so real, but obviously she's kind of like, okay, hey Nate, like I know what's going on right now and everything, cool, whatever. It's just so interesting, like how it grounds itself like that to make it, I mean, that is the point for it to feel so real. And it's just weird when you think about it too much, because you're like, because it looks and feels so real, you forget that it is part of like some sophisticated ass program. So it's just such a fascinating thing. And obviously in the long run, when Nate ended up telling her the truth, obviously she didn't, it's like, no, you don't have to protect me. You know, that doesn't just be on your shoulders. It's on me too. Like, we protect each other. So I thought that was kind of a nice thing. So a lot of other interesting things went down in this episode. We even had Alexis and Mara kind of bonding. So, because obviously Alexis isn't big into the whole like, oh, we can, you know, doing presentations and stuff like that. Which is, I think this kind of gave, like, I already kind of feel like we got a good enough insight into Alexis, especially with the whole Dylan situation, about like why she holds Reverie in such high regard. Because for me, I always felt like it seemed like, oh, she's ignoring all the problems. Because for her, it's like the biggest thing is like Reverie needs to continue forward. And it's like, now you kind of understand why. I figured it had something to do with Dylan, but even then I feel like that is kind of separate from her, because I don't know if she actually has her own Reveries made or not. Paul does, which we'll get to in a second. But the fact of the matter is, it's because for her, she's like, Reverie, she wants everyone to have Reverie. So for her, getting these problems here and there, she doesn't want to slow down, because for her, there are a little few outliers here and there. It's like for her, like the grand, it's not just like a creator's perspective of like, oh man, my machinery, like, no, it's perfect and stuff. It's like, no, it's because she wants people to have it, because it isn't just an escape. It helps people deal with things. It helps them not be afraid. Obviously in Nate's case, it gives you your confidence back. It can help people heal, and she wants that for people. So like I say, she has the best of intentions, and it seems like, you know, like I said, it seems like Dylan is kind of that, like, probably she created the whole Dylan situation. I mean, we don't know how old that program is. Like, maybe she's had Dylan for a long time. Maybe it's a more recent thing, but maybe Dylan's situation is what I would assume inspired her to make Reverie in the first place. So I don't know, it's just kind of a nice thing, them talking back and forth about the whole Leary situation, about kind of like, you know, listening to people, being empathetic. I thought that was just kind of like a nice touch. And even she's like, wait, did you just Leary me? And she's like, yep. Kind of winks, doesn't even say yeah, just winks at her, and it's like, yeah, it's kind of nice that they kind of bonded like that. Like, obviously, you know, Alexis is kind of a little bit like, whatever towards Mara, but it seemed like this was kind of the moment of kind of like, oh yeah, breaking things down. Just like, it's like, instead of being on like talking about the numbers and stuff like that, talk to them like people. Just talk to them like you talk to me about what you want Reverie to be, and that should be enough. You'll be surprised by what that is able to accomplish. So I thought that was kind of a nice little moment of building that bridge between them and stuff like that. Even that's one of the things she in fact said today. It isn't an escape, that is actually a bridge that connects people, you know. So I thought that was kind of a nice touch. It's interesting too, because even in this episode, she meets more of the team, people who help her get what she needs to with the whole like Reverie situation, like the armored truck and such. So I thought that's kind of a nice touch, slowly kind of expanding out, learning about more people on the Reverie team and stuff like that. So, but getting back to Paul, which is kind of what I was wondering about, because like he has one, does that mean everyone else has one? Does Charlie have one, or does Charlie and Alexis choose not to kind of do that? I'm just curious. But Paul's got multiple ones as well. One of them in particular is because he has anxieties and stuff like that, night terrors, and it was his way of kind of dealing with it. So he recreated the place he had them, his like home growing up, and it turns out what that all stemmed from was his dad. And basically because he talks about it's kind of what happened with Nate. The guy that ends up attacking Nate ends up looking nothing like the dude that attacked him in Reverie, because it seemed like the dude was much scarier in Reverie, but obviously certain details like the burned face, the two X's on the neck, like were specific details, but obviously because his fear manifested itself, you know, because Reverie doesn't just give you like what you want, it digs deep, it gets to learn who you are. It's like, okay, so there's this and this and this about you. It's like, it kind of shows you not necessarily what you want, but what you need type of situation. I thought that was it's kind of a neat touch. So in Paul's case, his Reverie created a special room, and that behind that special room was his dad, because his dad gets drunk a lot. His dad seems very abusive, and for him, it's like, yeah, but when he opens the door, his dad's just standing there calm. It's like, yeah, because he realized like what kind of person his dad was. It's like, my dad was just a sad guy who was unhappy with his life, unhappy with being stuck with a family he didn't want. So it's like, that's what made him get over it, by making him see like he thought his dad was this monster, but it's like, honestly, yeah, he's kind of an asshole, but the fact of the matter is he's just some sad old dude is all he was, you know. So, but you can still see that it does affect Paul, because even when he came out, he still wasn't okay. But she's like, that Reverie was for that, but you have all those other Reveries, so what are they for? And Paul's like, that's for another time. And she's like, oh man, that's sad. Like, but once again, it kind of feeds into what Alexis was talking about, like, you know, because even then, it's because even Mara's kind of like, really? You don't seem like that, because he seems so collected and just okay. It didn't seem like he's someone who dealt with anxiety. But to be fair, it's like, oh, he hides it well, which Mara kind of does the same thing too. So I just thought that was kind of a nice touch. It's actually interesting because Charlie knows a lot. It's kind of interesting because immediately when it came down to it, he kept asking Paul questions about the whole Mara situation. He's like, oh, who does she see? He's like, Paul was like, it's not my place to ask. He's like, oh, okay. And he's like, why? He's like, should I be worried? He's like, no. But it's like, what is he doing? Like, is he not saying anything because it's like, no, that's for Mara's sake, that he really doesn't want anyone else to know about it. It's like, I kind of figured it out because I've known her for so long. So I'm trying not to kind of dig up her business to other people. Or is it just, it seemed more so like he was keeping something buried. He even breaks into her house and doesn't let her know. Because I'm surprised Mara didn't call him out on that, because it's like, oh, it's like he knew. I mean, he was slick about it. He made sure to ask other people. He knew exactly who she was thinking about, because he saw like the bunny rabbit and the pictures of her niece Bryn. Like, he knew immediately. But rather than when he confronts her about it, it's like, oh, you're not doing this and you're not doing that, huh? I think Mara did a very good job covering it up. Even Paul didn't really realize it, but maybe it's just, you can make the argument, you know, it's probably for her. It's like, Charlie knows me, so obviously can see through everything. But it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of interesting because it didn't raise any red flags for her. But like I said, I guess because he went about it a smart way, hiding it. But for her, it's like, this is good for her. Like, yeah, for her, seeing Bryn made her feel good, because it was like, it's something she never thought would ever happen again. Because for her, it's like, that's why she was kind of feeding into it a little bit more. It's kind of interesting because even the derealization kind of reacts to her, because Bryn was kind of like, oh, like nodding to sit down with her and even smiling, and it's just like, oh, can I hug you and everything? Just a little hug. It's like, it was kind of interesting. And obviously she knows it's wrong. She knows it's not real, but for her, it's just kind of like, but I think that's that's the part where it kind of gets a little scary, because it's like, even if you're able to distinguish, it's not real now, but who's to say later on down the road something won't happen where it's like, it will get harder, because eventually you're going to become like everyone else that you're trying to save from Reverie, like trying to get them to leave their Reveries, who just get so caught up in everything that they don't want to leave, because this is where everything's kind of okay, this is where everything is perfect. So I just thought that was kind of a fascinating aspect to it, just like what this job means to her. It kind of helps her kind of feel good about herself. Something she's like, I haven't felt good about I mean, hell, she even quit the pills and the drinking, which speaks volumes, because helping other people is helping her, you know. So that was kind of good. But then ultimately she goes to the place and she sees Bryn there, and she's like, you're here for a purpose. It's like, what? And then everything goes statically, and she's like, wait, this isn't real. So it's like, wait, what? So does that mean at some point in time, someone slipped her into a reverie without her knowing? Is that what the derealization actually is? The fact is that, like, what is that exactly? The fact, because like, I'm so curious, like, what that means exactly, what that could mean. Like, I didn't look at the previews or anything like that, but it's like, I'm curious what the hell that means. Does it mean she's like, is that a byproduct of the derealization? Because she started taking the medicine again, and even when she took the medicine, she still was seeing Bryn. So that's when I was kind of like, wait, what? I was like, oh, did the medicine just not kick in yet? But it's like that started happening. So what that's all about, we'll have to wait to see in the next episode. I'm guessing, like I said, it's implying that someone's dumping her into a reverie. Because that's what I was thinking, because they were the way you were flashing to it, like back and forth. I was thinking like going to the house would make her see certain details she might not have seen, because we still don't 100% know what set Ray off back then that led to their deaths. And I kind of get the feeling with everything, Charlie has some idea. I mean, he was calling her at the time that the whole thing with Ray was going down, the other police showing up. I was like, was that Mara who called them in, or was that someone else? I'm thinking Charlie. So we'll have to wait and see. And once again, it's that situation that got asked last episode. Why is he taking such an interest in her? Like, he's never really gotten too involved with everything before, but it's like the moment Mara got involved, that's when he got involved. So is it because he's afraid that she's going to stumble across something messing around with Reverie, or what? Is he trying to protect her from something? What exactly? I don't know. We'll have to wait to the next episode to find out. I'm very interested to see where all this takes us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good